There is a road in West Africa that leads to the ocean. It is 4 kilometers long. It looks today like any other coastal path. Cracked earth, palm trees, the smell of salt in the air. But if you knew what this road once carried, you would never walk it the same way again. Millions of human beings were marched down this road in chains. They did not know where they were going. Most of them never came back. This is the story of Ouidah, a small city on the coast of Benin that, for over 200 years, was one of the largest exits from the African continent and the entry point to a life of permanent enslavement. This is the city that traded souls. To understand what Ouidah became, you first need to understand what it was. Before the slave ships arrived, this stretch of the West African coast was home to the Kingdom of Whydah, a small but prosperous coastal state that had grown wealthy through fishing, farming, and regional trade. The people of Ouidah were not a warrior people. They were traders and farmers. They built their homes close to the water and lived by the rhythms of the Atlantic tides. But their location, right on the Gulf of Guinea, perfectly positioned along Atlantic shipping routes, made them something they never asked to be. It made them valuable. The Portuguese arrived first, then the Dutch, then the British and the French and the Danes. Each European power built a trading fort along this coastline, planting their flags in the sand like they were claiming territory that had always been theirs to take. By the late 1600s, Ouidah had become something unprecedented in human history, a port city almost entirely organized around the buying and selling of human beings. At its peak, 10,000 enslaved people passed through this city every single year. 10,000, and that was just 1 year. But here is the part of the story that most people do not know. The slave trade in Ouidah was not simply something that Europeans imposed on a helpless people. The full story is far darker and far more complicated than that. In 1727, a powerful inland empire swept down from the north and swallowed Ouidah whole. The Kingdom of Dahomey. Dahomey was one of the most militarized kingdoms in West African history. Its army included an elite regiment of female warriors known today as the Agoji, fearless, disciplined, and devastating in battle. Under King Agaja, Dahomey had spent decades raiding neighboring kingdoms, capturing prisoners, and feeding them into the slave trade. When Dahomey conquered Ouidah, it did not shut the port down, it took it over. The kings of Dahomey became the landlords of the slave trade. They organized the raids, they decided the prices, they controlled who walked down that road to the sea, and they grew extraordinarily rich doing it. In the center of Ouidah, under an enormous tree planted in 1747 by order of a Dahomey king, enslaved men and women were displayed and auctioned to European buyers. The square still exists today. A plaque now marks where the auctions were held. Under the tree where people were sold like livestock, a monument now reads, "In this place, the slaves who would be embarked to the Americas were exchanged for shoddy goods, firearms, rum, textiles." That is what a human life was worth in Ouidah. And then there is the man who made it all run like clockwork. Francisco Felix de Souza, born in Brazil in 1754. De Souza arrived on the West African coast as a low-level Portuguese fort manager. He was ambitious, ruthless, and extremely good at building relationships in places where relationships meant survival. When the reigning king of Dahomey had him thrown in prison for reasons that remain disputed, de Souza made the most consequential decision of his life. He switched sides. From inside his prison cell, de Souza made contact with the king's half-brother, a military prince named Gazo. The deal they struck was simple. De Souza would fund and organize a coup to put Gazo on the throne. In return, Gazo would give de Souza exclusive control over the entire slave trade out of Ouidah. The coup succeeded. Gazo became king in 1818, and de Souza became the most powerful slave merchant in all of West Africa, with a title to match. The king named him Chacha, a word that became synonymous with absolute authority over the port. At the operation's height, de Souza's network was exporting 8,000 to 10,000 enslaved people per year. He exchanged them for guns, which he gave back to Dahomey, which used those guns to raid more villages, capture more people, and bring them back to Ouidah to be sold. A machine, feeding itself. De Souza died in Ouidah in 1849, aged 94, surrounded by his extensive family and enormous wealth. Today, there is a museum in Ouidah dedicated to his family. A plaza bears his name. His descendants are still among the most influential families in Benin, and the title of Chacha is still passed down through the De Souza family to this day. Now walk the road with me. It begins in the center of Ouidah, where the auctions were held. From there, it winds 4 kilometers south toward the Atlantic Ocean. Along the way, the captives were made to perform rituals, designed, the kings believed, to sever their connection to their homeland forever. The Tree of Forgetfulness. Women were forced to walk around it 7 times, men 9 times. The belief was that after circling the tree, the enslaved would forget their villages, their families, their names, their lives. Whether any of them truly forgot, we will never know. Further down the road, another tree, the Tree of No Return, planted as an anchor for the spirits of those who died at sea, so that their ghosts could not find their way home to seek vengeance on those who had sold them. Even in ritual, guilt whispered. At the end of the road, the Atlantic Ocean. Small wooden boats waited in the surf to carry the captives out to the large ships anchored offshore. Some people, seeing the open water and understanding that they would never see Africa again, jumped overboard. They chose the ocean over the unknown. Most did not have that choice. They were loaded onto ships heading to Brazil, to the Caribbean, to the American South. The beach at Ouidah was the last African soil their feet would ever touch. Today, a massive memorial arch stands where those boats once waited. Carved into its stone face are the words, La Porte du Non-Retour, the door of no return. The slave trade out of Ouidah finally ended in the 1860s, not because Dahomey chose to stop, but because British naval patrols made the Atlantic too dangerous for slave ships to operate. More than 1 million people had been shipped from this port over 2 centuries. Some historians put the number closer to 2 million. They went to Brazil, to Haiti, to Jamaica, to the United States. Their descendants, and there are tens of millions of them, carry Ouidah in their blood without knowing it. Today, Benin is in the middle of an uncomfortable reckoning. The current president's own family has roots in Ouidah. Political opponents have accused his mother's ancestors of aiding the slave trade. 2 new museums are being built, partly funded by the World Bank. A replica slave ship is being reconstructed in an artificial lagoon. The descendants of those who were sold and the descendants of those who did the selling now live side by side in the same country, attending the same schools, shopping in the same markets. The De Souza family, whose patriarch built his fortune selling human beings, remains among Benin's most prominent clans. History in Ouidah has never been allowed to simply be history. Every year, descendants of enslaved people from Brazil, from the Caribbean, from the United States, make the journey back to Ouidah. They walk the 4-kilometre road their ancestors were forced to walk. They stand at the gate of no return, and they weep, not just for what was lost, but for what can never be fully explained. How a city this small could hold a wound this large. Every city has a secret it never wanted told. Like, comment and subscribe, because we're just getting started.